I've got Erin Breen in-house. We are going to be talking about pedestrian safety. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Terry.
This is such an important topic, and we have such a problem in Las Vegas.
I tell people all the time, it's like an onion. You think you have the solution, but then we can peel that layer back and show you what the problem is. Someone this morning on the way up here just talking to me about people trying to make a transfer on a bus. And you don't realize as you drive down the street in your air-conditioned couch, the plight that people who are using public transportation, if they miss a bus, it'd be the difference between having a job or not having a job. Or sitting out where it's 180 degrees on the pavement for 45 minutes in some locales waiting for the next bus. And the RTC does a magnificent job. They really are top-notch. And there is so much that is involved in that as well. Because of air pollution issues, our bus stops are what we call far side, so that they're not at a signal unloading a bus and then catching a red light on top of it and idling there even longer. So they have them come through the intersection and park on the far side. What that does for an awful lot of people, because you can't get close enough to the corner, it's farther ahead. And then the person getting off of the bus, they can see their connecting bus. And they do what I affectionately and lovingly refer to as the 7-lane dash to death. And very often we have a tragedy on our hands.
The thing that you were describing with the RTC, as you said, for pollution reasons, and I would imagine it's also for traffic flow, too, to get that bus through the intersection and on the other side.
Everything's for the almighty car. Yes.
Oh, man. It is a car world, especially here. But you end up making the dash across the street, and you're right. And people who get off that bus and need to make a connection, they see the other bus, they don't have a lot of time, and boom, they run.
And, they know that they're risking their lives. And yet the general population calls them names and thinks that they're less than smart. You've never been in their shoes. I love to walk into a room of people to talk about pedestrian safety, and the first thing that I always ask is, show of hands, who's ever been a walking commuter? Doesn't matter who the audience is in Las Vegas. 2 or 3 people raise their hands.
Not a lot of hands.
Not a lot of hands. So we have this built environment here, and Durango's the perfect example. It's wide, it's flat, and it's unbelievably fast. As a driver, you're really comfortable going more than the posted 45 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, it is, and unfortunately we have a lot of those. So you have an issue with pedestrians and few places to cross the street that are safe. On a 45-mile-an-hour street, if there's not something physically stopping traffic, it's not a safe cross. But here you have big stretches of blocks with nowhere to cross legally. You ask yourself, how far are you willing to walk? And that's another one of my favorite questions, because the reality is, go to any grocery store, mall, whatever, and you see people trolling up and down the aisles for a parking spot, because as a society, we're not willing to walk. But we're really willing to say that they should walk a half a mile out of their way. And then there's the whole issue of, do cars stop for them when they're doing the right thing and they're being predictable? Again, on a street like Durango, you have other streets that intersect Durango, which makes it a legal cross for the pedestrian. There doesn't have to be a painted crosswalk. It's not a smart cross. I would never suggest it, but it's legal. And I think that there's a lot of drivers who very conveniently say they don't belong there, so they don't stop. And in fact, it's the driver that's breaking the law. So we've created this hostile environment for people on foot. We've created a real struggle between the walker and the bicyclist and the motorist. Motorists not watching and not caring when they see them because they can. It's kind of like a bully thing. And I would be remiss if I did not also say that sometimes people on foot take risks that they shouldn't, and they do stupid things. We all do, because we're all human beings. When it comes right down to the bottom line, aren't we all human? And as humans, we do dumb things. But we live in a city that's built for vehicles, and if you're not somebody behind the wheel of a car, you're really kind of screwed.
We're talking with Erin Breen today about pedestrian safety. Erin, what is your actual title? I just want to lay it all out there, make it official.
My actual title these days is that I am the director of the Vulnerable Road Users Project in the Transportation Research Center at UNLV. We recently, in the last year, changed the name of the program from Safe Community Partnership to Vulnerable Road Users Project because they narrowed my focus. I used to deal with all different kinds of traffic safety, but because we have so many issues with pedestrians, with bicyclists, with teenage drivers a little bit, I still work in that area, senior drivers and senior pedestrians. Sadly, that is the fastest growing population of pedestrian fatalities. In the last 5 years, our average pedestrian fatality age has ticked up an entire decade. It's so heartbreaking that 85, 86, 87-year-old people crossing these streets like Flamingo and Durango at night, mid-block. You just got to wonder, what are you doing out there? Why? They're so fragile. They can't move fast enough. It's indicative of a bigger problem.
We've both been in Las Vegas for a very long time. I don't remember in decades past this pedestrian safety issue being as critical as it is now.
I don't think it was because, A, we didn't have the population that we have that don't own a vehicle, and B, we've grown so rapidly and our streets are so fast. And, that's something that it's my favorite soapbox, the speeds in Las Vegas. We have a zero fatality program here. I believe in it wholeheartedly. But there's other cities that have adopted Sweden's program called Vision Zero. And Vision Zero, the bottom line is that it says people are the most important and that we value them over efficiency, which is almost unheard of, and that we build streets with human frailties in mind, knowing that we're not going to behave in the way that the book says we're going to, because we don't. We're human. So it looks at every crash as what could we do differently to prevent this from happening and being worse next time. And then it mitigates those problems. New York City adopted it January 1st, 2014, dropped their pedestrian fatalities 30% in the first year. There's not a street in Manhattan that has a speed limit that's over 25 miles an hour.
I've never been to New York City, but all the stuff I see on TV, nobody's moving anyway. It's just traffic.
Right. And they did things like they charged you to come inside the city, to drive inside the city. And it did have an effect on pedestrian fatalities, but they still killed 350 people in a year. But on a per capita basis, we're just as bad as they are. We don't have 8 million people in the city, but we have 2 now. That's why you're seeing the increase. And there's so many reasons on the whole speed issue. I understand that engineers need to move cars, that's their job. And I respect engineers. I don't want anybody to ever think that I don't, and they have a difficult job. But there is a way, and other places are finding the way faster than we are. Things like signal timing. On my way here today, it happens every time I come up Desert Inn. I'm the lead car at every red light all the way up.
Yeah.
Because they can't time for progression at 45 miles an hour. It's
I don't
impossible.
get that. That's what makes my husband nuts.
Well, it should make him nuts.
Drives
It should
him
make
crazy.
So consequently, what you have is people like me, if they weren't me and they weren't the traffic safety person, then they hit the gas as fast as they can because now you've stopped them for 180 seconds again. If at every mile you're stopped for 180 seconds, you're trying to make up that time in between. If we drop the speed limit back, we could time for progression so that you wouldn't hit you'd hit them occasionally because you have to, but you would get, if you caught the green light and you were the first car, well, you'd catch a lot of green lights all the way up the street because they could do what they call progression. So guess what? You wouldn't get to your destination in any less time. Maybe you'd even make better time than you're making now. And not only would pedestrians and bicyclists be safer, but literally so would people in cars. Because at 45 or 50 or 60 miles an hour, which people are going up Desert Inn or down Durango, you get in a car crash, you die in that crash too. But you hit a pedestrian, that's it for them. I think a lot of people don't understand. 30 miles an hour, 50% of the population hit at 30 miles an hour die from their injuries. That's just crazy. Average road speed in Clark County, well over 50. Not a lot of chance for survival.
The numbers of people who perish through pedestrian car accidents and die on the roads here when they're out on foot, it's just astounding. And we have these times where we have a little period of time where it's not so bad, and then it goes boom, 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 and it rackets up again.
Unfortunately. The message is the tough part because of that whole human being factor. We don't ever think it's going to be us. Never.
With very few exceptions, that's not why somebody steps out into a lane of traffic.
You're right.
Those are the people who go out there going, okay, I'm going to do it right now. We're going to end it right here.
Terrible. That's another whole subject. But they wind up not counting as pedestrian fatalities.
It's just a suicide.
But it goes down in the suicide database, not in the pedestrian fatality database. But so many people that think that there's some kind of fairy dust on their head or something. I don't know. I tell people all the time in crosswalks, just because there's a crosswalk there, no magic spikes pop out of the crosswalk to protect you from the car. It's up to you. And as much as I think that drivers play a huge role in teaching pedestrians to behave badly, as pedestrians, I also tell the people crossing the street, never assume a car's going to stop for you. Never assume that they've seen you. You have to take responsibility for that because ultimately you are the one who's going to die. I've never seen anybody, a driver, transported to the hospital, and I've certainly never seen one die in a pedestrian crash. It's the pedestrian every time. We had a crash here at the beginning of August last year where the county has now put up a lovely crosswalk, bless their hearts, and it was pretty darn fast in terms of infrastructure, but we lost 2 tourists on Valley View Boulevard crossing crossing between the Rio and the Gold Coast. The Rio has a little crosswalk that comes from their front door in the pattern in their parking lot that they want people to walk. So it's safe for the person in their parking lot. But then it leaves them 200 feet up Valley View, north of Flamingo, and there's a nice break in the wall of the parking garage at the Gold Coast across the street. So if that's where it brought me, I'd cross the street right there too. But as we were out there doing a news story last year, if you've ever noticed when there's a pedestrian fatality, there's a lot of very fluorescent paint on the ground if it's in Metro's jurisdiction. And they go out and they mark absolutely everything. And if you ever get the opportunity and you think that human bodies can survive vehicle crashes, go and look at some of those pedestrian markings because they're horrific. So there was a lot because 2 people died. So there was lots of different colors, bright paint everywhere, out there doing a story. And in a 40-minute period, we quit counting at 85, the number of people who crossed right there. So we finally started asking people if they would talk to us, whether they were crossing east to west or west to east. If they had just finished the cross, I'd say, we're out here doing a story because 2 people died here last night. Oh, yeah, I saw it. But
you're still out here crossing.
Yeah. And people would say to me, yeah, but I made it. Or the people who were getting ready to cross, and they'd say, oh, yeah, but I'll be fine. Did you think that the 2 people crossing the street didn't think that they were going to be fine too?
I think they were thinking the same thing.
Exactly. So we are frail, and sometimes we need to admit that.
People versus car. Car wins.
Car wins. Car wins. I have a favorite poster that has a Sherman tank and a VW Bug, and it says at 40 miles an hour, both are deadly to a pedestrian, and that's a fact. It doesn't matter. We've seen bicyclists kill pedestrians, the motorcyclist that killed the motorcyclist and the pedestrian. We're frail beings, and my very favorite campaign we've ever done, it was designed by a high schooler, it was bright yellow, had the pedestrian icon on it, and it said, pedestrians not equipped with airbags, and that is a fact.
That's a clever slogan.
It is. It won.
We have had a real explosion of not only population and growth here in Las Vegas, but what I consider to be an explosion of pedestrian safety problems. More people being struck. I don't hear too many stories where people survive those.
Because of the speed. Surely because of the speed. I just went through the most recent database we have. So the most recent data we have for the back-to-school stuff looking for kids. And we're doing so much better with children than we were. In 2011, 31% of the number of people that were struck by vehicles were school-age children. The majority of them elementary school-age children. And then in 2012, we dropped that number to 20%. And then in 2013, it was actually 12.5%. So we're doing much better. But looking closer at that, it's not the elementary school kid now. High school, number 1, and middle school, number 2. Those are the kids that are walking on their own without someone reminding them of the rules of the road. So I tell parents every day you got to remind them because they're kids. I think sometimes with adults every day you got to remind them. But as drivers, you don't have the right of way at a signalized intersection when the light turns green. Just because the light is green for you, the person that's in that crosswalk, they have the right of way. And it's called superior right of way because they are the fragile being. So it's your job as the driver to look to your right before you make the right turn, to look to your right if you're looking to your left for a gap in traffic if you're on a red light. Because boy, if there's a pedestrian there or the permissive left turn, the flashing yellow arrow or the solid green ball, people are looking for the gap in traffic so they can make the left turn, but they never track to the crosswalk to see if there's someone legally crossing the street there. Because if you have the green light, so do they. So we've seen a big increase in signalized intersection crashes as well. And every time you pass someone that's waiting at an intersection, whether it be signalized or not, every time you blow past them driving and you don't give them the courtesy of stopping, you're teaching them there's no reward for you to come here. We've created this mess. And most people who drive, they think that they're the victim and that we're, like when we do enforcement, I've had people say, you're trying to entrap us. And I say, no, we give you twice the stopping distance. And if you don't stop for someone in the crosswalk, you get a ticket and you should.
When I'm out in the car, yes, I'm trying to get wherever I go, but you think about the time element when you're out driving on the roads. And yes, it may delay you a minute or two, but think about what you're risking if you end up hitting someone who is a pedestrian, who is by their rights supposed to be the one getting...
Right. Well, even if they aren't in the right, unless you're some kind of sociopath, you kill somebody, it's going to change your life forever. Metro does a training where they bring in a national group to do reconstruction. It's a gentleman by the name of Rusty Haight, and he's a pretty famous dude. So the first time I went to Rusty's training, he has weighted dummies. The male weighs 185 pounds, the female weighs 120 pounds, and now he has a kid that weighs 85 pounds. They suspend those dummies on a street, and then they take cars that are already already wrecked and they run them into the dummies to reconstruct the crash. The sound, literally, yeah, exactly that. And it was years ago the first time I went, and it still makes me sick. I just can't imagine it really happening.
You notice I flinched. I physically flinched when I thought of what that would be.
Yeah. Then we have the whole issue, it's truly man's inhumanity to man. The number one person in a hit and run crash is a pedestrian, because you don't do enough damage to the vehicle to stop it so it can't run. So the number one people leaving the scene of a crash is a pedestrian, and then a bicyclist, and then a motorcyclist. There's a new law about that, because most often that person's impaired, and if the cops can't find them immediately, then some slick lawyer gets them off.
You didn't do enough damage by hitting that person,
so you can leave. They don't call for help. It's just sad. We were in Carson City for a conference, actually testified in person on that bill. While the testimony was being taken in Carson, Metro was down here working a hit and run of a 14-year-old girl on her way to school. That some drunk driver, and they knew he was drunk because they retraced his steps through the night, but they couldn't prove it because he had any kind of a defense. If you can't get actual evidence immediately, then a slick lawyer is going to get him off for DUI. They get charged with hit and run. So that's why we wanted to raise the penalty for hit and run. And, sadly, a lot of our laws, that's how they came about. There was and it's still so vivid, a 13-year-old boy at Bonanza and Eastern went to Roy Martin Middle School, and he was crossing the street to go pick up his younger sibling at elementary school. He pushed the button and he waited for the signal, and he got the walk signal, and he stepped into the crosswalk, and a truck driver killed him, making a right-hand turn. In the paper the next day, the law enforcement, the fatal investigator, was quoted as saying that he asked the driver, "Didn't you see the young boy?" And that the driver said, "Well, yes, but I thought he'd stop for me."
What?
Yeah, well, I'm driving a big truck, so you would stop for me, right? He wasn't impaired, so he got charged with failure to yield. That started us on a journey for misdemeanor manslaughter. And so there is a law now. It took us 3 sessions to get it.
And lives in the process.
And so the penalty is the $1,000 fine, and they could send you to jail for 6 months. And our intention was not, if you're a driver who makes a bad mistake, we don't want to lock you up, but we want the victim to have some recourse, to think that something more than a citation happened to you. That's how that started. And now we have the Vulnerable Road Users Bill, that you don't have to kill somebody. If you're a driver and you're the cause of hitting a pedestrian or a bicyclist, it's the same. It's a $1,000 fine, and they could send you to jail for 6 months. Just trying to get motorists to pay attention to vulnerable road users. And now we have the hit and run law. And we have a couple other new pedestrian laws that people should pay really close attention to. In a school crossing zone, along those streets where kids travel to school, and it could be any street. So if it's a school crossing zone, you'll see that it does have flashing lights. In those areas, when they're flashing, so when they're active, no U-turns, just flat prohibited in a school zone or a school crossing zone. We're trying to cut the potential conflict in half, because that's what that does. But the big one is no passing another car, so that the speed is set by the most prudent driver. Because what we see is people slow down, but they won't really slow to 15, or they'll slow to 15 and then slowly creep up. Now, all law enforcement has to do is see you pass another vehicle in one of those zones. And that's a school zone, school crossing zones. Those are double penalties,
That's
too.
the big ticket.
That's a big ticky. And again, it's just trying to save lives. It blows my mind how hard things like that are to pass. I've been called a nanny stater more times than I can count. But I just want to say to people, seriously, if the life that's saved is someone you loved, what are you going to think of me then? That's what makes this such an awesome job, because I have the opportunity both to get incredibly frustrated, but to do great things.
Erin Breen is with us today on Talking Solutions, and she's got to do with the Vulnerable Road Users Project. Look, I don't care what kind of consequences they lay on the person who hits a pedestrian and then runs from the site.
Right.
Throw the book at them.
I agree. I think you should get locked up. Throw away the key. If you're willing to do that. We had legislators in the hearing say, well, what if people just panic?
Okay, that would seem normal.
Yeah, so what if they panic? That's not an excuse to leave someone for dead in the street. I'm sorry.
And sometimes people do panic and then come right back.
Yeah. Well, they were saying, well, if someone has been convicted of DUI in the past, we think that should be part of the law, that in order to be charged, you have to, basically what we've done is we've raised the penalty to be equal with a DUI with death or substantial bodily harm. Because because we had incentivized you as a drunk driver to leave the scene. If they couldn't catch you, you weren't going to get charged with DUI. You're just going to get caught with failure to render aid and leaving the scene. So it was almost smarter, which is just so sad. Now it's not. But I was dumbfounded in hearings when legislators said if they've been charged before and been convicted of DUI, then you could assume that they were drunk. It's like, well, it's not just about being drunk. It's about being a human being. You should have stricter penalties if you leave the scene of a crash when you've caused death or substantial bodily harm. And we've had some horrific high-profile cases where that's happened. That crazy woman that hit the grandfather pushing the baby carriage.
Oh, yes. Rainbow near Warm Springs.
Yes. So see, it sticks in your mind, doesn't it? And you're not in my business.
Yeah.
It's like every one of them stick in my mind. Every single one. And probably I take it far too personally. It makes me a little crazy. Any of the crashes, but especially the hit and runs. And, I can't imagine being one of those EMS people. The fatal teams for all the law enforcement agencies and the ambulance drivers and the paramedics and the firefighters and the REACT team and all of those people. How do they sleep for the next week? And then they have to relive it over and over and over again in court because you're trying to fight the charge. If we all just took responsibility to start with.
I know, that's a big dream, isn't it?
If we all, when we got behind the wheel of the car or we left on our two little feet. And, another thing, and I really have to say this before I run out of time, as a pedestrian, you can't wear gray and navy blue and black. You have no idea how much you blend in with the road.
I'm wearing a black outfit at night, going in a non-crosswalk area.
Right. Truthfully, at the speeds that we have in Clark County, the driver has no time to see you and react when you're dressed in white. So we tell pedestrians at night, you got to carry flashlights, bright lights, light yourself up. Give a driver at least 100 yards to see you, because at the speeds that our roads are, it requires 100 yards, the length of a football field, for them to see you, have their brain tell their foot to move off the gas and to the brake, and then the stopping distance of the car. Literally plan on a football field's length. So many times people are not aware that you can't see them and they don't understand stopping distance. We have a new program. If you get a citation, if you're the driver or a pedestrian and you get cited in Clark County and you go to justice court, they're going to give you the opportunity as a pedestrian to have your fine waived and as a driver to have your fine reduced if you come to a class that we have put together with a lot of the partners. It was written by myself and Nadia Fulkerson from School of Medicine at the Trauma Center. It's being taught by Metro, NHP, volunteers, Sherry Bush, who lost her son in a crash. So we have a variety of different people involved in the class. As a driver, it's going to cost you $20 to come to our class, and as a pedestrian, it'll be free. And we're going to take the $20 from the drivers and buy lights and reflective stuff to give to the pedestrians when they come to class, because a lot of them just don't have the means. It would be the difference between eating or having a light. So
they're walking in the first place, so I'm going to think that, yes, for fitness and health, that's a wonderful thing, but in a lot of cases, I don't think the people who are out there on foot as pedestrians have any option.
No, the walking commuters, they're doing that. It makes cops so angry when I say this, but for years I have said, when you hand a pedestrian a jaywalking ticket, which is my least favorite word, you're really handing them a warrant for their arrest, because if they could pay that ticket, they wouldn't be walking. So this is a way now for them to be able to not have it go to a warrant for their arrest, because they just have to go to court and come to class and they won't have any out-of-pocket expenses. And, that took a lot of people, including the judges, to be on board. It also took the district attorney's office, and I was doing an event with Metro at the end of February, and Steve Wolfson was there, and he came up to say, what are we going to do? Because fatalities were so out of control. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I have a meeting with Judge Bonaventure this week, and we're pushing this class program. And Steve instantly said, tell him I'm in 100% support of this. Then we went and talked to the judge, and it took a long time. It took months. But when we presented it to all the judges, the DA was in the audience, so it kind of had come full circle. It took a lot of people to say, yes, we will support this, because it's bending the rules. But sometimes to save lives, that's what you got to do, is bend some rules.
Erin Breen is in with us today on Talking Solutions. We're discussing pedestrian safety. I think a lot of this also is awareness. As drivers, as individuals, we just need to be aware of what we're doing and what we're not doing.
Well, and Terry, it is being aware not just of the pedestrian, but of every road user. And, we're so distracted as drivers. The cell phone is just the bane of traffic safety. And I don't know what the solution is because, again, no one thinks it's them. And they think that they're able to multitask and, I know I'm good at this. I can do this. No, you can't. The reality is the law in our state that says that you can talk on your phone as long as you have both hands on the wheel, I don't think we'll ever change it. And how did that happen in a span of 20 years? I was one of the last holdouts for cell phones because I lived with a beeper for so many years, and I just consider a cell phone a better leash. How did we go from having free time to literally being wired into anybody who wants you 24/7, no matter if you're driving a car, literally, and just, fill in the blank, whatever things you've been doing and it's been ruined by a cell phone. It's really ruining traffic safety. And it's people walking with their face on their phone. It's people driving with their face on their phone. It's a bad combination. We're losing pedestrians because they're not paying attention. Not only do they have their face on their phone, but they have earbuds in their ears.
Yeah, they got the earbuds, so they're not hearing what's going on.
They can't see, they can't hear. But the same thing happens behind the wheel. It's the cognitive impairment. It's not the physical one hand off the wheel. The average time they've proven how much more dangerous a driver is with a cell phone than drunk. Isn't that crazy? Because your eyes are off the road for an average of 5 seconds. You don't realize it because you're looking up and down, up and down. And I say to people, in 5 seconds, at 40 miles an hour, at 66 feet a second, do you realize you've traveled a football field? Would you close your eyes and do that? And people look at you like you have 12 heads. Of course I wouldn't close my eyes and do that. Well, okay, that's what you're doing.
Kind of works that way.
Yeah, but we don't ever realize that because it's never going to be us. So no matter what mode of travel, bicyclists, it's most often the driver's fault, not the cyclist. We don't see the alcohol issues that we see in pedestrians. It's almost like the complete antithesis. It's simply drivers not paying attention. So we have and I hate to just keep throwing out all these laws, but boy, if you don't know them, listen to this program today and you're going to learn a lot about vulnerable road user laws. We have a law in the state of Nevada that says that you have to give a cyclist 3 feet. And really what it says is if you're on a multi-lane street and you have the ability to, you have to pull into an adjacent lane.
It's their lane.
Exactly.
That's what the law says.
Exactly. If it's not possible to pull into that adjacent lane, you have to be as far to the edge of the lane as you can. Because if you've never ridden a bike and had a 45-mile-an-hour car go past you, the vortex of that car, it sucks you in. How dangerous is that? So here we are encouraging people, get out and walk, get out and bike, get out, and then we kill them in record numbers. It kind of is detrimental to our initiative to get people moving.
This should be a city, and our weather should be a place where it would be a great place to be a bicyclist. But it's not. The city and the roads are not built to accommodate bicyclists.
No. And speaking of the city, I would also be remiss if I didn't give kudos to the city of Las Vegas because, boy, are they trying. And in every way, they're lovely green bike lanes downtown. You'd be crazy to use a car downtown, really. Blocks are short. The streets are narrow. The speed is low. There's accommodations for everybody. It makes you want to live there. And it could happen in other places. It just takes will. The thing that people don't realize is if these kind of issues are important to you, contact the people that you elected on a local level and on a state level and voice your opinion. We don't have to get where we're going at 50 miles an hour. We could plan ahead and give ourselves a little more time and make it safer for everyone. Alcohol-related crashes, drug-impaired crashes increase again. It's just crazy to me. How does that happen? And it happens with complacency. People think, again, it's not going to be me. Plan ahead, people. Take responsibility for yourself. And the whole zero fatality goal, I've had a lot of people give me grief about that's an impossible goal and why would you ever set that? I love to say to people, what's the goal at your house? They can tell you that they think a good goal is 100 or 50 or whatever number they think is acceptable, which is mind-boggling to me. But when you bring it home and say, how about people you love? How many people that you love is it okay to die this year? And of course, people go, oh no, no, the number's 0. Well, so how can it be 0 at your house and have the goal not be 0 everywhere?
I hope that our discussion on pedestrian safety today, at least top of mind awareness.
Right.
We just need to pay attention. We've got so many distractions in the car between the cell phone, which, by the way, I put my purse in the back seat.
That's good.
They call it the connected car.
Right.
We've got internet service that you can get in some of the newer cars.
Why would you need that? You are behind the wheel of a car. Mm-hmm. We're wired everywhere we go, and we're distracted everywhere we go. And we're paying the consequences for that with lives. Sometimes I think that the mindset of society society is that fatalities are the price we pay for the convenience of owning a car, but it does not have to be that way. Think about that. If you're one of those people that, A, you think it will never be you or someone you love, I've just met way too many of those people, and they never in a million years thought it was going to be someone that they love. And here's the other thing that's crazy. It's always the most awesome people. When I meet the family afterwards, it's like I really would have liked to have known that person. It's not the jerks of the world that die. It's the kind souls. There's just something so wrong with that.
We're going to have to keep making people aware until it starts to sink in.
Yeah. With loved ones, we're inclined, as they're leaving or you're leaving, whatever, that there's always that final I love you. But in reality, if we took that 10 seconds to say, put your seatbelt on, or make sure you have a light if you're walking, make eye contact with drivers, that is so much more meaningful than the mindless, however you wrap up a conversation.
Erin Breen, I want you to be bored, and I want you to have nothing to do in your job.
Me too.
And I want to watch any kind of TV news locally for weeks and weeks and weeks and a year and never hear about a pedestrian or a bicyclist fatality.
Me too. Honestly, it could happen.
Pay attention.
Yeah.
Concentrate. Don't be distracted.
Yep.
We can put a stop to not just a lot of this, all of this.
Right. Everybody's got to do their part. I always hate to sound like things haven't gotten better because a lot of people are doing their jobs. The enforcement in the state of Nevada held up as a national example of what's right. Engineering, we've come so far in this city. Now we need drivers and pedestrians to do their part too.
Erin Breen, Vulnerable Road Users Project. I'm so glad you came in.
Thank you.
Talking Solutions is a production of the Community Relations Department here at Beasley Media Group Las Vegas. Get more information on today's topic on our Talking Solutions page on Facebook, where you will also find links and a podcast of today's show. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.